the meeting of this, it might be nice to have a reminder about those. Oh, no, I'm not going to paste them because it thinks that it's too long. Oh, no, there we go. They're very long. I'm trying to experiment a little bit with some ways to make our meetings feel, honestly, a little bit more structured now that they're digital. Paolo, I'm going to kick it over to you to introduce Francisca, and then we'll get going with kind of our regular agenda. Paolo, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So we do have quorum, and also Francisca is here. Francisca also works with the city of Beaverton in the neighborhood programs office, and so she is helping to. She's been dealing with the headache of our Zoom government account, and so she's so nice and like wanting to come here and make sure that things run smoothly because we're just kind of getting our feet wet with it. And so huge shout out and thank you to Francisca, and I'll turn it over to you, Francisca, if you have other people you want to share too.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, my name is Francisca Rose. I'm the public involvement coordinator in the neighborhood program. Most of you have probably gotten an email from me at some point, but I just wanted to introduce myself and say I'll be in the background as tech support if anybody needs anything, but I'll be muted and have my video off. So in case you're wondering why, I'm here, I'm watching and listening, but it's your meeting. So just wanted to briefly introduce myself.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Francisca. Welcome, Annala and Mercy just joined in. So I wanted to, our agenda says we're going to start with minutes approval. Mercy had emailed me in advance of the meeting and had asked about some of her comments from the last meeting were not in the minutes. So Mercy, I'm going to have you maybe connect with Joy directly if we want to add some of that to the minutes. Did other people have comments or questions about the minutes? Are we able to do, Paolo, are we able to do, I guess we'll table approval of them until we've been able to update them with Mercy's comments. So let's table June minutes until August. We have, so next on our agenda is public participation. And my window here says that we have an attendee, Kinsey Johnson, who I can't actually see.
What?
Oh, I can't see that either.
Who?
Yeah, so in webinar, the public attendees don't have video functionality. It's so that there's no Zoom bombing and to maintain the integrity of the meeting. So Kinsey, Lanny, you're welcome to use the chat functions, raise your hand, use the Q&A, and then if you want to be able to speak, use your microphone, just raise your hand and I'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask a question or make a comment. So, but you won't see their video at any point.
Okay, thank you. That's a feature I was not familiar with, so that's pretty cool. Whoops, I muted myself. So I did want to do a quick reminder. We're going to be doing reminders. We're optimistic that we're going to get a little bit more public participation with our inquiry sessions. And Tanya had gotten in touch with me asking about, can we invite people to be part of this? And I think we should. And so I did want to do a quick reminder of our public participation requests that we ask for 2 minutes per 2 minutes per person or 10 minutes max for entire agenda time. Thank you to Paolo. I'm going to paste, this is in the agenda, but I'm going to paste our email address. So this is the big thing I'm hoping for, is that we can get people who want to have more substantive comments to email them to equity@beavertonoregon.gov. And that gives your co-chairs and your liaison some time to read those comments and like process them and to be able to share them maybe in a little bit more depth during meetings.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Please do.
So for right now, we're going to be using the equity@beavertonoregon.gov mailbox. But actually live now, we have it on the HRAC website, a form where people could actually fill out comments or questions. And so that's live. I just had to send this agenda out ahead of time. But moving forward, people will be able to leave comments and questions on the HRAC website where there's a comment form.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for setting that up. And attendees, again, I'm new to this thing where we have attendees and panelists, so I just realized you couldn't actually see the thing I pasted in the chat, so hopefully I fixed that now. My screen does not think either of our attendees have their hands raised. If that's wrong, I hope somebody can catch that for me. So if that is okay, I'd like us to move ahead to our liaison updates. If I could get sort of like a general nod from our panelists type people. Like, oh yes, excellent. And I did, before we dive into liaison updates, I do want to remind people that BPD is on the agenda twice, right? So let's please not bombard poor Neil with like, let's go ahead and start this inquiry session right now. That's its own agenda item. So Neil is going to give us the BPD update, and then we're going to check back in with BPD. So our first we've got council update with Councilor Fagin.
Okay, and I will try not to steal anybody's thunder, but just a couple of items. Paolo sent out the invite to the associate judge open house, for lack of a better term. Your very own Miranda Summer will be the first one on the list at 5:30. And you all are invited to ask questions ahead of time or show up and participate in the session. It should go for an hour. There are 4 finalists, and I think it'd be really good to get some questions from any of you that are interested in it. So the associate judge will work in our courts and interact with our whole community on everything from parking tickets to DUIs. And one of the reasons we have the court is because we feel strongly that if you do run into issues with the police, that you're going to your own city to go to court instead of to the county. So that takes place this Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll get answers for you. I'm not sure if the police are going to talk about it, but I wanted to give you the council perspective on the police policy discussion. We will be having what I think will line up to be a series of work sessions. The first one will either be the 7th or the 14th. I haven't seen the agenda yet. When is it, Rhonda?
It's the 7th is the first work.
The 7th. Okay. So thanks for that. Yeah, the agenda hasn't been posted yet. I think it'll come out tomorrow. But we'll, as a council, be talking and getting informed on what our policies are, why they are what they are, and if there are alternatives that we should be considering, and what the implications of the alternatives are. So I expect that will be a number of work sessions, kind of like we did last year on the charter. So again, as we get moving with that, your participation, your questions are welcome. Your comments are important, and we want to hear from you. The next one on the list is kind of a response to COVID and impacts. The buildings are still going to be closed through the 22nd of July. I would anticipate that when we get closer to that, if things are trending the way they are now, they will be closed longer. Some staff will go in and work from the building. We have, as a city, provided grants to a number of organizations. The first wave was probably the fastest that went out in Oregon to restaurants and bars to help them after they were ordered closed. The next wave was to more small retail, non-chain, and if anyone got a grant in the first round, they weren't eligible in the second. The arts department is looking at doing some arts grants. They've done some, and they are going to do some more to mainly people that would have participated in the summer programming. Because all of those events are canceled, they were all budgeted, and staff wanted to use some of that money to help support the organizations that would have participated and received compensation, but they can't, and we're hoping they're around next year when we do hopefully have events. We also know that there's going to be more needed, and we're not sure when or how or what type of support, but we as a council have talked with staff, and staff is aware as well that we're going to have to support our community as we go through this, and we're open to ideas as we move along. The last thing I have is the charter passed in May, and so I'm acting as the liaison for the council with staff to help make sure that all the work that needs to be done between now and January 1st, when the charter takes effect, actually gets done. The mayor has given me authorization to work with staff. Council doesn't have the ability to direct staff on anything. That's the mayor's job. In this case, because of all of the things all the moving pieces that are going to happen, I'll be working with staff, mostly department heads, to make sure we accomplish everything that we need to be doing so that when January 1st arrives, the city is ready to start with the new charter and have a city manager in place. That's all I have for tonight. Appreciate your time, and if you have questions, go right ahead.
Does the city manager start in January, or will they be hiring for that position in January?
Yeah, so what it appears that will happen now, we've talked about it at our last work session, is that the current council will hire an interim city manager that will be ready to start January 1st, because that's when the charter changes. The new council that will be seated January 1st, which will include additional councilor, will then work on the recruiting and hiring of, they don't like me to say permanent city manager because it's not a permanent job, but full-time city manager. We anticipate that that search will take like 4 to 6 months. So it'll probably be about a year from now when we have our full-time city manager.
Cool, thank you. Wait, hang on, Mercy, you're muted. Let me see if I can.
Thank you. Is the city open, or is everyone working remotely?
So there are some jobs that need to be done in the building, and those people are reporting and in the building. Most everyone that can work remotely is working remotely, and then the public works people that are out in the community, they're distancing by traveling, I believe, 1 per car instead of in carpooling, and then doing the work that they need to get done this summer. So working, but doing it remote or socially distanced.
Yeah, thank you.
Sakhan, go ahead once you get yourself unmuted. Yep. I think we might have, not 100% sure here, sorry. There's a lot happening on my screen right now. I think we may have lost Kosakan, so we will.
Okay.
We'll
check
bring
in with
him.
them offline.
We'll bring him back.
Yeah, I'll check in with them offline.
Okay, cool. So next on our agenda, then, if we're good with our council update, is we would get our BPD update with Lieutenant Stellingwerf.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes? I can't hear anybody else. Okay, so thumbs up. That's how it works. Real quick, in an effort to move things along and save time. Everything's going very well on the road right now. Everything's been reasonably safe. We have plenty of PPE for our officers. We're still at a very good operating level as far as staff goes. From the community services side, we're still throwing around ideas for Coffee the Cop because we want to start working on some community engagement so we can get out there, meet some people, talk to some people, and do things of that nature, which we did pre-COVID. Now we're just trying to figure out how to do it with the world we live in now with the COVID. We're also discussing Shop with a Cop, which always traditionally has been a pretty good program for children in our community. And the last thing is, I talked to you about it last time, our community academy. We're still on track to hopefully have something in the fall. We're not sure what that looks like yet, but I will keep everybody updated as that moves along. And like I said, I'd like to invite some folks from the HRAC to attend that once we have a curriculum or an agenda put in place for that. Again, no guarantees, but that's our hope that in the fall we have something like that. And unless there's any real pressing questions, I'll just move it along as we are going to be speaking to you here later on in the agenda. So any questions, raise your hand and we'll take care of that. Okay. Perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Lieutenant. That was speedy. I love it. Let's turn it over to our MYAB representative, Annala Swafford.
Real quick, I'm sorry.
Oh, yep, please.
Francisca, if you can hear me, I think Kosekhan is back on, but he's on the attendee side. If you wouldn't mind promoting him to a panelist, please. Okay, thanks.
Okay, there is not too much happening considering none of us are in school and it's summer. But the ACT has now been postponed until the fall officially. There was one on July 18th and it is now canceled. As it should be, but still that's going to be stressful for the fall. I don't know what the school plans are for the upcoming school year in terms of like what that's going to look like, whether it's online or in person, or I've heard some interesting ideas. So I guess we'll kind of see where that goes. But if any of you have any information on that, I would love to know because they're just not telling us. So
they're not telling you because literally no one knows, and there's a whole
good.
lot.
Okay, so that's not okay.
So picture this. That's where we're at right now. Like from the ODE on down to like every teacher you've ever met. So,
and I'm sure it's incredibly stressful for them. So I hope I hope that they figure something out. But there's also been. I mean, this is probably pretty evident, but there's been a huge push in terms of like activism with the youth, like from across the country, which I did not really anticipate, but I got, DMs from these climate activists in Wisconsin that are looking to like start different programs from across the country and like network with other youth. And they're talking about like intersectionality between climate change and how it's disproportionately affecting, communities of color that live in low income neighborhoods. So it's really interesting to see a whole bunch of youth try to become educated on issues really fast, because I think 4 million kids are turning 18 this year and are able to vote. And so I don't know, it's been interesting to kind of see that push and the significant change in discussion with youth just over like the last month. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's really cool. Thank you for that. Does anybody have questions for Annala? Awesome. Paolo, I believe you're up.
Hi, I'm texting with Kosekhan, not on Facebook or something. Y'all actually already mentioned all the updates I have already. I think in addition to the city buildings, everything, mostly everything is going to be available still by remote business or by phone or online, including housing, business resources, mediation, culturally specific services, building permits and applications, utility billing, and more. Library programs and city events and other meetings and activities will be happening all virtually. There is let's see, for the library, there's contactless curbside pickup service at the main library. And 5 days a week, library card holders can make an appointment at www.beaverton. I'm going to write it in the chat. To pick up current holds that are on held status, as well as up to 3 books for kids geared towards specific reading levels or interests. And yeah, everything else was already mentioned. The Beaverton Municipal Court will begin to reopen at a very limited capacity as well, specifically for criminal arrangements or specific instances where defendants are unable to use technology to access remote hearing options. Other than that, everything else was already mentioned. I'll write in the website in the chat box for the library pickup.
Fantastic. Anybody have questions for Paolo? Cool. Paolo, I'm going to mute you again if that's all right. So next we are moving on to the meat of our agenda this evening, which is talking about these inquiry sessions that we're going to be engaging with Beaverton Police Department. I'm going to I was going to attempt to share my screen, but I'm not sure if I want that. So what I wanted to do to just sort of introduce this a little bit was talk about, in case you have read, I'm hoping that everybody has had a chance to read the document that I sent out about the inquiry sessions. And if you could just sort of give me a like thumbs up or some sort of like, yes, I read the thing. I see a lot of, as I was saying in my classroom, I see a quorum of thumbs. Excellent, excellent. I wanted to really briefly recap that. So like, what are we doing and why? I think most of us know the why. The why is that Black Lives Matter, right? And that structural racism and police brutality disproportionately affect communities of color. Part of our why is also that leadership in BPD wants to engage with the community. We have a great opportunity here. And specifically, and this is the part that's exciting to me, is as HRAC, we have this history of connection with BPD, and that is a large part of like what our time is devoted to. So we already have these relationships, we already have this engagement. And so it's awesome that we're at a moment when we want this kind of citizen oversight and citizen input, and we're already in a position to be able to do that. So that I think is pretty cool. What else I wanted to say in terms of introducing this is just talking about kind of what, talking a little bit about the purpose. So I give a lot of credit to Dori. Dori is wise in all things. But Dori in particular pointed out that the way that we've structured this is an inquiry, right? And so my teaching background is I'm a science teacher. And so that really resonated with me, that is what we're doing. We're asking a lot of questions. One of the phrases that I use a lot in all aspects of my life is accept and expect non-closure. And I was really, really thinking about that with this idea of like inquiry, right? That we're engaged in a dialogue, and I'm really excited for that. And I'm trying to keep myself focused on like the dialogue itself is meaningful, that like the process is meaningful. So when we talk about this idea of purpose, I would say like just really keep that at the forefront of your mind. The way that we have but we will also add to that like our purpose is dialogue, right? And our purpose is listening, and our purpose is for us to get a chance to I don't know if you were not here at the very beginning, I posted in our community norms, so like our meeting expectations, and one of the things that jumped out to me was this idea of remember whom we serve and why we serve. So I think this is a really cool opportunity really for us to not just represent our own viewpoints, but for us to represent community viewpoints. I'm hoping that this is the most I'm going to talk ever. So I'm going to mute myself, which, you know, I should always do. And I'd like to turn it over to Chief Groshong. So she wanted to give us some words of wisdom. And then we will talk a little bit more about these inquiry sessions and kind of our goals, and have some chance to start with some questions and thoughts. Chief Groshong, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Laurel. Well, thank you for having us here tonight. I know Neil's a regular, but I appreciate the invitation, and also the meeting last week with some of you. I want to first and foremost just say that we've always been here to listen and learn, and are very appreciative of your feedback, and even more so now. So thank you. You know, there's areas that we can improve upon as a police department. We never have sat back and said, we're great, we're good, and we don't have to do anything, because if you do that, you're not doing the right thing. We constantly evaluate how we do business, how we train, interact with the community. You know, and to say that we're perfect or anybody's perfect is, you know, no one can say that, I don't think. And so we're here to answer any questions and work on a positive dialogue and find out what it is that we can do to further these, to let you guys know a little bit more about what we do and why we do it, and also learn from you guys on what your perspectives are and how we can work together to come to a positive solution, or I don't know if it'll be a solution, but it'll be a work in progress, if you will, in the future. So thank you. And I will turn it back to Laurel. Thank you.
Real quick, I think Spencer had a question, but maybe it's that was in the chat.
My question had to do with the interaction between, well, the governor's extended her emergency order of closure until September. So you're talking about reopening the city. That confuses me. Going back an agenda item, I apologize.
We can answer that. I'll let Captain Smith answer that.
Oh, it's my understanding that that's the state of emergency by the governor. It's not necessarily a stay-at-home order extension. So I think it's, if I understand it correctly, it's a state of emergency which allows certain things to remain in place, and it allows the government to take advantage of certain resources.
So the state can do state of emergencies in 60-day time periods. The city can only do it in 2-week time periods. So it's just a difference in how the rules work and what each jurisdiction can do. And we're right it's right that the reason for them is it gives different authority and different policies and procedures to the governor as we work our way through this.
So I got one, Chief Groshong. So let's go ahead straight to the heart of it, straight to the meat of it. Why should the citizens of Beaverton trust you and your department?
Well, we have I've been here for 25 years, and for 25 years, we have, since I was hired, have want to build trust in the community. And I think we have a lot of support and a lot of trust in our community. We're constantly striving to do things better and to be transparent. And I think we have done that. So I guess why should, on our track record, as far as our history of community engagement, our history of self-policing and transparency, I think that sure, we can do things better, but I think that we already have a large amount of trust in our community.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna dive back in here to get us.
Could I also just have a quick? I don't think we've congratulated our new chief, Groshong, and
that's right. Yeah.
Watching her assume this position, I, for one, am incredibly encouraged, and I feel like it was a step in the right direction. I know you've expressed in some other meetings, you've brought such a humbleness to what it takes to be successful in this position, and I'm incredibly encouraged, especially as you talk about an evolving process of continuous improvement and never having reached a state of perfection. We are here to support you as you strive for betterment in the community, and yeah, we'll definitely challenge you. There's no question about that. We're great at that too. But hooray! I mean, it's on every level. It's just so exciting to see you in this position and to see you at such a competent, accomplished, amazing woman inhabit this position. I can't tell you how, as an individual, and I think as a group, we're really excited about that. So thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Stephanie. We were remiss in that. Let's go to Kosa Khan.
Yeah, real quick, talking about congratulations. I think the day after she was appointed, I sent an email to Paolo to congratulate Chief Groshong on her appointment on behalf of HRAC. And he replied that he forwarded it to her. I don't know if she got the email. Paolo, can you confirm?
I get it.
Paolo?
Yes, it was sent.
Okay.
Fantastic. Am I missing anyone else? Okay. So I wanted to do a little bit of, just to introduce a little bit more of an introduction of what we're going to do. I was going to talk a tiny bit about scope, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dori. This is a nice balance because I am a very much the forest, not the trees person. So then we're going to turn it over to Dori, and she's going to talk about more of the specific goals for each meeting. So what I wanted to say about scope, so this will be our goal. One of our goals is that this will be our next 6 meetings. So this is what we're doing for the rest of 2020, which I find really exciting. And I wanted to put in a quick, just to frame this, I talk a lot about this idea of granularity, right? And so framing this in terms of HRAC scope, let's not forget what we are able to do, and let's not forget what we're not necessarily able to do. I was saying to Paolo before other people joined in on the call, like, oh yeah, okay, so reminding people that like, we're probably not gonna dismantle structural racism tonight. I'm really sorry, everybody, like, that's super disappointing to me too. I also want to dismantle structural racism like before I make breakfast tomorrow. But what we can do, and I think that this is really cool, is we can have a pretty profound impact on our very small corner of the world. So part of what is the actionable piece of this work that we're doing is that we're hoping to come out of this with some really specific policy recommendations. So there has been so much drive and enthusiasm around giving this board more to do, essentially, and giving our work a lot of meaning, that I think that that's really good to keep in the forefront of our mind, that we're looking at like, what specific actionable steps can we recommend, and how can we even maybe come up with a plan for those actionable steps. There was something else clever that I wanted to say about that. I'm looking over our what Dori's going to talk about next and seeing if there's more that I want to add there. Oh, that was what I wanted to add. We've talked before in meetings about this, and it seems like there's a fair amount of enthusiasm for this. This idea of like, you might have to do some homework outside of the meetings. And I would say that this is really going to bring that home, that I would hope for each of us that as we have time, right? And again, there's a very small human being in the next room who reminds me that I actually don't have time for anything ever. But as you have time for these things, I'm really hoping that we'll be able to do a lot more, to do more of the work outside of the meetings, right? And that then we can come to the meetings having done our homework, prepared to really be able to engage with BPD and to use their time very well, and to use the limited time that we actually have together. So that was just like trying to frame that, like think about work that you may be doing outside of this. So we have a lot of, for example, we have a lot of reading material that we kind of held off on sending this time because it was many, many, many pages, and we need to spend a little bit of time kind of maybe paring that down. But just do be looking in your email for optional recommended readings, and just kind of like keep that idea in mind. So scope, thinking about like work outside of meeting time, and also thinking in terms of like, let's keep it really granular and let's focus on what we actually can do. I'm gonna turn it back over to Dori. First,
We have one question in the chat from Joy. Who is it that actually makes the policy for PD?
And then I also just want to say, I do see, Mercy, that your hand is up, so we'll turn it to you next.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we used to write our own policy. We used to call them general orders. This was years ago. I was like hired in 1995. And then I can't remember what year it was. I want to say in 2012, we switched over to what we call Lexipol, which is a company that writes best practices and policies for police departments. And so we get best practices and policies from Lexipol, and then we tailored it initially in 2012 to fit, come together with our general orders and the Lexipol policy to make the best possible policies. Continually, we get updates on Lexipol policy. Lexipol will, a new case law, or it's a lot based on case law, but they'll send recommended updates from Lexipol to us to say, do you want to accept these policies, or we have the ability to change them and make them more fit the Beaverton Police Department. And a lot of time, and that happens constantly throughout the year. It might be use of force, it might be child abuse investigations. Our policy manual is, I think, 687 pages long, and it's all every policy you can think of. So, and most times it's reviewed with our, if it's a training issue like use of force or anything like that, then we send it to our use of force training cadre, if you will, and then they have best recommendations, and then it's reviewed by senior command, so myself, the captains and lieutenants, and then we decide on whether the changes that are recommended are worth keeping or they don't fit our policy. Like, for a lot of times they have language in there that says you should do something, and we think no. And maybe, for example, when you go to I'll throw this out, a traffic accident, you should write a report. No, you shall write a report. The officer shall write a report when they go to the traffic accident. So we change wording like that. So that's how we get to our policies.
Thank you. I also want to, I think Mercy had a question here. If there are other groups involved in this type of project besides HRAC. And so at this capacity, HRAC and BPD are the main partners in this. But I do know that there are other things happening as well, but I can't really speak to. I wonder if Chief Groshong, if you know.
Okay, a couple things. I was dialing my friends back here. So also with the Lexipol, I wanted to also say that we are accredited. We're nationally, I think it's nationally state accredited. So every 2 years, there's an independent auditor that comes in and audits all of our files, all of our policies. And we have passed accreditation for the last
95.
since 95. Yeah, since 1995. So there is a third person out there. Sorry, I forgot about that. And I'm sorry, Paolo, can you repeat that question, the second one?
Sure, yeah. Mercy was asking if there are other groups involved in this type of work. And I say for this specific project, right now, the main players are BPD and HRAC. I'm not sure, Mercy, if you were wondering if any other community outreach efforts or anything was happening. And so if you, you're on mute right now. Mercy, you're on mute.
I think she disappeared.
Mercy,
Mute.
there you are.
Okay, my question was, because the introduction that was made, I was thinking if there were other advisory board that were part of this discussion with you, with the PD department, because I feel like it's a really big project, and I don't think that HRAC alone you should just hear from what we have to say. It's not that what we have to say is not valid, but the more you hear from many people, the more you understand the impact of what everybody is trying to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think HRAC alone, what we say and what we think should be able to lead to policy. So it should lead to policy, but it shouldn't just be leading to policy alone. It should be with other inputs.
Yeah, they do case law and stuff like that, drives policy.
So you want to answer that one?
Yeah, Mercy, I'm hearing what you're saying, and just the Diversity Advisory Board is another one of our local boards and commissions that we meet with monthly, and I know they have an interest in law enforcement in a big way. It's a very similar model to this, where I'm the liaison for the DAB and give an update, but then there's a lot of question and answer, and quite frequently, if there's a major event nationally, we discuss those, and sometimes that may shape or create questions about our policies. Quite frequently, we're just answering questions and about the way we do the work and what our policies guide us to do.
Right.
So much like in this meeting in DAB, we're doing that on a regular basis I'm doing it at home, and I'm sure every other officer is too, because this is such a big deal. I spend time talking to my kids and my nieces and nephews and my family and friends and neighbors who just want to know, well, how do you guys do these things, or what's your policy on this? So it's really just a big opportunity to educate, and what we need to figure out how to do best is create a platform so that people can come either to our website or whatever the platform might be, and broaden our ability to share that information. We're doing it through our outreach and Copy with the Cop and our community academies, and a host of different ways. We just got to figure out the best way to really expand that, because there's just so many people that are ill-informed about how this job is done, what kind of training officers get, what their tactics are around the world. There's so many people that don't realize that policing in Beaverton is way different than policing in a county out in Eastern Oregon, or policing in Oregon is different than how policing is done in Florida. A lot of times people think it's a universal police, like almost like a government policing that occurs, and everyone does it the exact same way, and it couldn't be further from that. And so it's just an educational process by and large.
I'm going to jump in with a moderator note here. So Kosakon has had his hand up for quite a while. So I want us to go to Kosakon next, and then I know Tanya and Cameron, I know that you both have questions, but I do want to have you hold those for just a moment, because I really want us to be able to hear from Dori. So I'm going to unmute Kosakon here, mute myself. So we're going to go Kosakon and then Dori.
Yeah, thank you. My question is for Chief Groshong. That policy that you just described, the way you get your policy, does that include training? And if not, how do you figure out what kind of training you need for the BPD?
So our policies don't include, well, some of them do. Like with our firearms training and our taser training and stuff like that, our policy dictates that officers will be fully trained in that, and train either, like our firearms is 4 times a year. And taser is once a year in a certain amount of blocks if we want to remain accredited, or so we have those certain specific things that are training, bias-based policing. So it's hit and miss. We don't train on every single policy all the time. Some policies are just in there that are pretty common sense, like when to write a report. We don't train continuously on that. But the high liability items, pursuits, like I said, use of force, firearms, anything to do with that, we're constantly training on that. And policy, some of the policy speaks to how many times we'll do it a year and what that will consist of, and some doesn't. But our training division is very astute. They strive, they want the best of the best. And the best of the best means being safe with themselves, with all officers and our community members. And so it's high priority, our training. Our training is high priority, sorry.
Thank you. Let's go to Dori to talk a little bit more about specifics and goals, if that's all right.
Absolutely ready for you all. And I just want to say, what I'm noticing in the chat is what I personally as a human appreciate about this group, that the discussion has already begun, right? That people are already asking questions, already investing and sharing their thoughts. And I just want to go back to something that Laurel said that I think is very important. We all have personal views, and we have to really concentrate on who it is that we represent. So we are representing the community of Beaverton. And I want to mention something that Mercy said, which was a question that came up in one of the planning sessions right away, which was whose voices are centered and present in these discussions, Mercy. So that question is an important question for us to ask. So as we look at our proposed sessions, Paolo, if you could pull up and share your screen so that we can see the details on the sessions. As we look at the upcoming sessions, this first session is really, it's setting the base. It's setting the foundation. It's an overview. We're going to review the goals of all the sessions. We're going to look at our group norms, make sure that they will help and support us in the work that we want to do. Ultimately, I want to go and skip to December 2nd. So December 2nd is really what we're looking at. What's the final product? So the final product that this group is being asked to produce is a set of recommendations and a discussion of next steps. And I think recommendations is broad. So it could be broadly policies, practices, and processes, right? Those are the 3 Ps that I oftentimes think of. So we may have recommendations around any of those things. So going to what August will look like. August, the theme is data transparency and communications. So there'll be some information that we will be able to review before that session, and it's going to be curated. As Laurel said, there's so much information about policing out there in the world right now. In particular, as Chief Groshong pointed out, there's a huge manual, and we're not going to look at 600 odd pages of the manual. We're going to try to focus each session. Then in September, we'll move to current community outreach channels for feedback and dialogue in the community. So Mercy, this addresses some of what you're saying, and advising on community listening sessions if desired, right? So there might be some opportunities and multiple forums for the police department to hear different voices. And then October, we'll be looking at the use of force policy, existing models across the country, and best practices, and proposals for reform. So some things that have already been heard in the public eye, a can't wait, and other options. Then in November, this concept of community oversight, what would that look like? What would it look like for BPD to have community members look at their work as well as the accrediting committee for them? So that's basically the overview. And Paula, if you can take that away so we can see each other again, that would be great. So that's the overview. Now, will other things potentially come up in those conversations? I think one thing that Laurel said that is so true in any kind of work of inquiry, we're going to ask a lot of questions. All questions don't get answered. So I think that's an important piece to be okay with. And to know that sometimes you might feel a little bit of frustration because maybe the major question that you had doesn't have an answer yet. But just by asking that question, by putting that question out into a space, you're helping other people to think about it. I'm sorry, Paul, I'm reading yours. Yes, thank you. So that does not necessarily, the oversight committee does not necessarily mean that that is HRAC. It could be any kind of formation of committee. But we're thinking through those processes. So as I said, we'll be asking a lot of questions. Some questions we'll get answers for. Some questions we may not get answers for. So we have to be okay with that. And with that, I know that Paolo has one more thing for us. Thanks, Paolo. And so we will do that check-in after September, but I know Tanya, I think, is up next with a question, and then I believe Cameron. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I wanted to see, Paolo, do you have any more, and then Kosakan, we'll go Tanya, Cameron, Kosakan. Paolo, did you have any kind of like procedural or logistical stuff that you wanted to say before we open this up more broadly?
No, I've actually just been typing it in there.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully y'all are cool with that.
So I think at this point, I want to, if you've not looked at the agenda or you don't just happen to have it right in front of you here, we're actually ahead of our agenda, so go team. But right now we're on inquiry sessions, deep dive, questions and thoughts, and we have until 8:15 in our agenda. So I'm really hopeful that we can have an opportunity for all of us to feel heard. You can direct your questions at this point. Honestly, I'd say like if you have, these could be questions for Dori and Paolo and Joy and I. These can be questions for Chief Groshong. So they could be questions about like how are we going to do this? They can be like things you're thinking about. It's pretty open-ended at this point. And then I do also want to encourage people, like, please do use the chat box. So let's go to Tanya.
Hello. One, I'm really excited that this is going on, and Chief and the officers whose names I now forget. I'm really glad that you're in this with us, and that what I think is great about Beaverton is that we can have a dialogue. We don't have to have huge protests and gases thrown at people and rocks thrown at cops and, you know, all of that. I'm just glad that we can do dialogue and to be honest and direct. The piece that I keep coming back to at this point in looking at policy and how things are happening with departments around the country is the implicit cultural biases. And I'm wondering what kind of work is being done to help the officers. My personal experience with officers is coming to, there were a couple different city meetings, there were neighborhood meetings. And I live in the Vos neighborhood, high mix of Latinx communities. And what my experience was, my neighbors at the local Mercado, saying, yeah, they pull us aside all the time. Yeah, they'll stand next to the car. They won't do anything, but that there's this intimidation factor. And people are afraid from the community to report these because they're concerned about ICE. They're concerned about they're gonna lose their jobs because they get pulled aside. And when I've expressed this to various patrol officers, they're going, why don't they trust us? I just don't understand. We go to these classes and it's like, and this is one specific younger officer. And I just kind of thought, I don't even know where to start with that response from them. And so I'm really concerned also. My dad was a cop back in the 50s and he hadn't walked a beat. I know, and I've asked, like, why don't you get out of your car and walk in the neighborhood? And, oh no, we don't do that. Which I think a cop driving by, but not getting out of the car, there's something about that. In my neighborhood, people walk around a lot. There's, you know, Lombard and Allen, there's a whole little market area that you could walk to a bunch of different places and just talk to people. You know, just having a cop in those areas would help people feel safer. And that's what I'm hearing from my neighbors. And I think there's implicit cultural bias that needs to be addressed. I'm out. Peace.
Thanks, Tanya. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say thank you. That's fantastic input. And it's something that it happens so seldom. There's not a really good excuse for it other than our officers go from call to call to call. So if we could create an opportunity to where that becomes a standard piece of their work, that's easy to do. That's not a heavy lift. So that's great. Thank you.
And then also, Tanya, implicit bias. Yeah, we all have implicit bias. And we are cognizant of that, and our officers go through training. In fact, they just finished some training through CIS, which is our insurance carrier, on implicit bias. And so that is at the forefront. We know it exists. We know we are definitely not immune, just I think like anybody. But can we do better and train ourselves to constantly remind, or, you know, you get busy and you don't think about your implicit bias, but take a step back and realize absolutely we can. And Captain Smith is right. The getting out and walking on foot is something very easy that we could do better. So thank you for that.
Excellent, thank you. Let's go, Cameron, you're next, and then I have Kosakan and Joy, I thought I saw your hand up. Maybe. So we'll go Cameron, Kosakan, and then Joy.
Okay. So I'm looking at the BPD public manual right now, and I'll say I only had time to skim it because it is, 687 pages, but overall it is a very complete manual. You've got a lot of stuff in here that other cities had to fight for. But I just wanted to go ahead and address a few things. It's jumping forward a little bit, but I think it's good to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and share this so that everybody can follow along. So first off,
is that if there's a link to that, can you also share that maybe in the chat, and then I can push it out via email before our next meeting too?
Yeah, I can do that. Can't do it simultaneously, it looks like. So one issue I just noted right here, the reasonable belief. So we've seen officers before claim they were in fear for their lives in situations that are not objectively reasonable. So the one that comes to mind just off the top of my head is the killing of Tamir Rice. An officer claimed he was in fear for his life when an 11-year-old had a toy gun and was not charged as a result. It's not an objectively and it was not objectively reasonable, but it was found that it was reasonable, that the officer's subjective belief was reasonable. So that's just one I am concerned about. The next I'd refer to, let's see, it's 303.6, your use of tear gas guidelines, so we've seen the use of tear gas to an extensive degree in Portland and other cities. Obviously this is highly concerning. I could not find the last time that Beaverton actually used tear gas. This is probably an over concern, but just simply the amount of tear gas that we've seen just deployed without regards to who's around and how it's deployed, that's just always a concern. But then the reason it is more concerning is in conjunction with Section 435.7, your use of force policy. And the reason I'm concerned about that is that your use of force policy indicates that these crowd control devices should be directed towards individuals. One issue that we have seen in the ongoing protest is actually pepper balls, tear gas grenades, flashbang grenades, other objects actually being directed at individuals in contravention of the training for those. So we've seen reporters get their eyes blasted out. We've seen people's skulls cracked open by flashbang grenades and tear gas grenades. So that's just an issue of concern that I think should be addressed and we should look at. But then, it's not really a question, I just wanted to bring it up and see what your thoughts on that were and really what you had to say about that. But then two particular areas are, one, what is your policy of cooperation with the Portland Police Bureau, given everything they've got going wrong with them right now? And then also your stance on the use or the purchase and use of a long-range acoustic device.
Okay. Cameron, those are a lot of questions, so I'll try and let me know if I'll try and address them very quickly here, if that's okay with you and the group, because I think that these could be part of the future discussions. So I will start with tear gas. At 25 years, we've never used tear gas for a riot or a crowd control situation in Beaverton. Now, with that being said, there is a countywide SWAT team called TNT. They respond to high-risk situations. You know, when we have a situation that's above what our skill level is, they're a little more skilled. They have been on certain critical incidents known to deploy CS gas into a residence where there is a suspect inside the residence. I can't tell you when the last time that was done or how often it has been done over the years, but I can tell you that we have not deployed CS gas here in Beaverton for crowd control. Okay, so there's that. And then also the new case law came out, and or not case law, excuse me, legislation came out on the tear gas. And it says that we can only use it if the riot is declared, and that is one deficiency in our policy, that we could add language in there only if a riot, if we declare a riot, that we could deploy the tear gas. So that is one of the policies I was actually thinking about that we can make an amendment to match current legislation. Mutual aid for Portland. So law enforcement agencies have a mutual aid doctrine or agreement. So if an officer down in Portland, officers are being shot and killed, and they call for help, we need help right now, our officers are dying, we will go down there and provide aid to Portland police. The last time we went down and helped Portland for any kind of crowd control has been Occupy Portland. We went down and helped with that. Since the murder of George Floyd and the protests, we have not sent our officers down for any of the protests or marches or anything like that. We've essentially just stayed out of Portland, partially because, you know, we need to take care of our own community in case something were to happen here, whether it be a protest, something violent, or some kind of other major incident, and all of our resources are down at Portland. We feel we need to take care of our own community, unless there are, you know, something so egregious down in Portland that we have to absolutely go. And what else did I miss, Cameron?
Long range acoustic.
Oh, no, we don't have that, and I don't see a need to ever purchase something such as that.
That was excellent. Thank you. I wanted to interject to say, Chief Groshong, thank you so much for saying the murder of George Floyd, not the killing of George Floyd. That just noticed that. Thank you. If it's all right with you, Cameron, I'd like to turn it over to Kosikon.
There was one.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
435.7, the direction of OC and CS towards individuals. So like I said, we've seen people be seriously injured by the use of these so-called less than lethal devices when they are aimed at faces.
Okay, I was confused. So you're not talking about gas, you're talking about our less lethal munitions.
So the deployment method is however it is deployed. So occasionally, you know.
So that is one thing that we train on at the range. Officers to carry those munitions, we call it the 40 millimeter less lethal. They have to train on that and be certified in that. They just don't get to pull it out of their car or the sergeant's locker and go out on the street with it. They have to be trained. And also the training includes, it's never pointed at the head. If it's pointed at the head, it's the use of deadly force, because you're right, it will kill somebody. We do the qualification for it is from the waist down, is what we use it for less lethal interaction.
Can I just real quick, just a reminder for folks to try to avoid using too much lingo and acronyms. Folks in here might not know, also these meetings are being recorded now, and so folks from the public may want to look at these as well, may not know. I happen to know what some of these are because of video games, but you know, that's just lucky. So I think up next we have Kosikon and Joy.
Okay. Chief Groshong, my question is, unlike country like France, the US doesn't have like national police. They have like local police department and close to 18,000 police department. I wonder how, and you mentioned that policing differ from one department to the other. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wonder how a policing can differ from, let's say, Beaverton to, let's say, Gresham. If someone, let's say we made a change, all the necessary from here, and then we work good with Beaverton police department, and residents have good relationship with the police department here, and someone moves from, let's say, Beaverton to Gresham, where things are quite different. I wonder how Gresham selects their policy. Is it based on the population who lives there and what kind of, who lives there, or how they select the policy to police their community?
Yeah,
I'm dialing a friend right now.
I think that's a good question. I think what comes to mind for me on that topic is policing in regard to statutes and laws. That's the laws are same in Oregon for all the cities. But what might make it different in Beaverton and Gresham, and I think you said it, was the population. Gresham has a different budget than Beaverton has. I know that they struggle sometimes for funding in the areas that they need it. So they may not have the same ratio of officers on the street to population. So which could lead to officers going more call to call to call and not having the time to do proactive policing or community-based policing the way they would enjoy doing it. So I would say, like for Beaverton, although we're very busy, there are times when we do have time to get out of the car and spend some time having a conversation with somebody, or maybe we could spend 20 minutes with a victim, and maybe even longer than that, as much as an hour, to introduce a victim advocate into a call and spend a great deal of time working with just one victim on one call, where in a bigger city like Gresham, without those resources, they may be forced to make that just a get in, make peace, and get out of there. And so that's just one example, but there's probably a number of different examples how policing looks different from city to city.
And I guess what last thing I'll add about that, fundamentally in Oregon, all officers go to the same academy. So we all get the basic training, if you will, all as one state. We have a standard, you've probably heard of the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. So everybody goes to the state academy, so everybody gets the same baseline training for that. Only when you go back to your department, like our department, for example, we also have an in-house academy, and our FTEP might be a little different. But fundamentally, all officers in Oregon have the same baseline training going into it. And then, like Captain Smith talked about, there may be different policies with different agencies, but it's, everybody's got the same base, if that makes sense.
Can I throw one thing in here? So how that works from a council level is that we try and have a certain number of officers per number of residents. And what that does is it gives us a baseline budget that as our city grows, the police budget grows, and that allows us to do the training that we need to have the officers available to participate with the community. And it kind of sets the foundation so that we don't end up in a situation where we don't have the appropriate funding, which means we can't do the appropriate training, which means we don't have the right number of people out on the street, and they don't have the time to engage with the community. So there's a financial policy side of this as well that council participates in.
I had a very brief follow-up question on policies, bouncing off of Cosacon's, which is that idea of, I don't know a lot about Lexipol. And so Cosacon was asking kind of policy differences and similarities. What percentage of regional or city-based police departments are using a similar source for their policies?
Well, I know that a lot of agencies use Lexapol. I don't have the numbers right now. I can probably get those for you, but I know that like King City, and there's various agencies that I've just heard recently that are moving to Lexapol. So it's pretty as a base. I don't want to say template because that's not really what it is. It's pretty widespread, and then each agency, like I explained, can make their own tweaks to it.
Excellent, thank you. I do, to bounce on Councilor Fagin's point, if you have, you're reminding us about HRAC scope. If you have more questions and comments about Beaverton Police Department budgeting, there are a few avenues to get involved on that. And we should talk a little bit if that's something that you're interested in. Let's go to Joy and then Mercy.
It's so hard to hit that mute button. Congrats on being chief. That's so exciting. So my question is, so I'm delighted that there's a national standard. How does Beaverton Police feel about exceeding the standard and being better? Because if we're going to overcome institutional racism in our own little scrap of earth on which we live, we may need to exceed the standard. There are so many examples, like no-knock warrants, qualified immunity, using a least restrictive option, making use of force decisions based on the severity of the situation and not just that you could respond in a certain way. Things like that. How does Beaverton Police Department feel about maybe doing something more gentle, more inclusive, less harsh, for lack of a better term?
Well, I can, you know, what I said earlier tonight, as far as looking at other options and listening and finding ways to better do things, you know, that includes, you know, looking at, like I said, different ways of doing things. A lot of our, you know, based on reasonableness and the language in the policy is based on federal case law. Graham v. Connor and Tennessee v. Garner, which I think were 1983 and 1989.
Here's my copy of those decisions.
Okay. So basically, a lot of our use of force policies are based on federal case law, and we
Here's let me restate the question. Pardon me for interrupting. I think we can do better than what the amount of extreme force that the law allows. I think that there are many cases, many of them in the current media, that could be done better. I became an EMT at 20 and then went on to become a paramedic and then work in government and do a lot of really interesting things. And Breonna Taylor should be alive. There are people losing lives every day, and I am not blaming all police or Beaverton Police Department, but I think we can do better, and that's why we're here. How do you feel about not doing things that Tennessee v. Garner would let you do and doing something else?
Well, when an officer goes to any situation and when we train, our whole goal is safety and not to hurt ourselves and not to hurt any community member. You know, just because the federal case law allows us to do something doesn't mean we jump right to that. We train and train and train on de-escalation tactics, on responding to people in mental crisis and how to de-escalate that. We don't, you know, I think there's this belief that we just jump to immediately what we can do, and that's not what we do. Are we open to doing things better? You betcha. You know, like we know we're not trained to be mental health professionals or counselors. I want to say a third of an officer's time is spent dealing with people in crisis. That's not the answer. Can we maybe change policy or do something better to better serve people in mental crisis as a community, yeah, we can. So we don't want to hurt anybody.
I don't think you want to hurt people either. I would never say that. I worked the street. I graduated from medic school in '90. Rodney King riots. So that was baptism by fire. I know nobody goes in with an ill intent, but I do think better. I mean, I don't want anyone to feel defensive, but it is an adjustment. I'm asking how you feel about that.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to just add how I feel about that. And that is, I think, the exact same thing that Chief's saying is absolutely, we want to be better. We've always wanted to be a better police department than the next police department. There's a little bit of a competitiveness to this profession, and we'd like to think that we're the best in the area, the best in the state, and that helps us recruit. And we get people that come in when they apply here and they go through our process. And I feel really great when I hear them say, well, this department feels different. It seems like you guys really care. You treat us really nice. You don't treat us like you're a military organization or we're a number. It's a personal experience. And so it goes from the recruiting, and we hope that that translates to how our officers work on the street. And I think the key thing to speak to is training. It's really all about training. And we do have a generous training budget. And I would hope that that would never get taken away or reduced to an area, to a point where we can't do the type of training that we do. And we have the luxury to spend the time on that every year. And we have people that are dedicated to doing that. We have a training cadre of people that have become professionals at training the police. And so that makes a department a lot better. So do we train to those case laws? Absolutely, because we need to know what we can do and what the law will protect us on. But we go beyond that. And absolutely, we want to be better at being able to defuse things and be able to come up with creative ways to not have to create circumstances that don't need to be created. You'd be surprised how many situations we actually walk away from. We actually look at the totality of the circumstances. We almost had to do it tonight. What would come out as a very dangerous situation, and without the previous experiences of our own and other police departments, we might take the second to say, whoa, wait a minute. Are we creating something that's bigger than it needs to be? Or should we consider maybe just walking away from this and let cool heads prevail? And so there's a bigger piece of consideration that's going on every call. I can think of an example when you have one of these constitutionalists who doesn't want to give us their driver's license or doesn't want to participate in a traffic stop. We used to spend an hour out there trying to get the person out of the car, break the window, do everything, and give them a ticket for speeding. Well, wait a minute. We don't need to do that. We'll write the ticket and put it on their windshield wiper and say, see you later. We don't need to make a big deal out of something that doesn't need to be a big deal. And these are just lessons that we've learned. So yeah, to answer your question, we want to be better. We want to be the best.
That was excellent and really heartening. Mercy had a question from the chat that I thought was really good. So we were going to go to Mercy, then we're going to have a brief interjection from Dori, and then we're going to go to Tanya. Mercy, I think you're still muted. Let me see if I can. There.
Do I have to repeat the question?
It would be good, yeah. Would you please?
Okay. So first of all, I really like what's going on here. You know, it makes me to feel like what we see out there, other people see it, that we call problem. And I like this discussion. But what I don't like about it is the fact that we are volunteering advisory board. Being given extra work is what I don't like about it. Because for long in history, people come to this kind of platform, take these great ideas and turn it into something really great, but never recommend where those come from. I feel like this kind of conversation is needed. is needed in different platforms. We must not be the only person or the only group that is doing this. If PD so desire to hear the voices of the people out there, I suggest that they create another avenue. Put money out there, give people stipends. They will use their time to do a lot of research, like what Camera did, what Joy is doing. Before I would ask my question, I would have to go through all those kind of avenues and do a research to make sure that I'm making a great impact on this conversation. But you know what? We have day job and we have other stuff that we are involved with. But when you put money out there to give people stipend, some things that I'm involved with other people, they are getting valuable input from the community. So I suggest you go ahead and go and do that too. But with that being said, and I thank you, Joy, for what you said about the use of force. And this is not about me, but I'm going to make it about me a little bit. What are you going to do? What have we identified as problem for PD to, since the entire new movement have come up? Have you identified something that you're going to be working on? I mean, have you identified issues in your own department that this movement have brought to you to work on?
Well, I think, no, I'm not on mute. Well, I think that our policy, the 8 can't wait and each of those tenets and then the new legislation that passed, I'll just say it again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. There's always things that we can do better with it, if it's making small adjustments or big adjustments to use of force or any other policies. And we are looking at those and we constantly scrutinize those. But it's not something that can happen overnight. It takes time to figure out what's wrong with the policy and take action, put policy procedure into place. So, and reaching out. One of the things we are doing better is realizing we need, although I think we do a pretty good job with community outreach to HRAC, DAB, and other members of the community. We can do better at that and get more input on seeing things through the community's eyes rather than our own. So yeah, have we made a change to policy since, 2 weeks ago? No, we haven't made a change to our policy, but we're working on it. I have sessions with City Council, work sessions starting next week to discuss different avenues on change and bringing the community forward, into these work sessions to take part in them. Has that happened yet? No, it hasn't, but it's going to.
Okay, my second question is not long, guys. So one thing I would like for you guys to work on, and I don't know where to go find it. That's what I'm saying. Maybe if you're paying me a bunch of money and I know I'm going to discuss this kind of thing, I will do research before coming here, but I have day job. So I don't know where you're going to find this, but let's say Sally, for example, call you guys one time in December a year ago, say a Black kid is here and he's taking something that he's not paid for. He's been accused of taking something he did not pay for. Well, when they twist the Black kid, they twist my car. And so they came to my house. Well, we had planned for that day. So he went and left the store and went on his run. Well, in the evening, like around 7 or 8, we had about 8 PD cruiser here trying to arrest someone because Sade accused him of something. Did that worth 8 cruiser, or did I just worth one person coming here to see, to really search what was going on? So it's those kind of things that I'm talking about. Is that in what situation require action at that? Like Joyce said, we need to reduce this kind of force. It's Sade. Sade does not sell anything that worth $1,000. Everything is $5 and less. So if even someone went there and stole something that is $5 or less, that does not worth using the city utilities and their tax bills to send about 8 cruisers to the kid house. So what are you guys doing towards those kind of events? And what even led to those kind of stuff?
Right. And, you know, Mercy, I can't speak to that situation. I'm not familiar with it. You know, there's always, you know, you get some information, we have some information. I don't know why there was 8 cars there that night.
I still been asked about it from my community members.
I'm sorry, what?
My community members still ask me today.
Why?
So why were those people here? Why? 8 cars.
I don't know why.
I know. I don't know either.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't know what that would be found in what part of the policy. That is not necessary. Okay, Saturday did not say he had a gun. Saturday did not say he shot someone. Saturday said he took something, accused of taking something. But we hired about 8 cars to follow him. Why waste resources like that for something at $5 or $10? That's not necessary, police.
I think I'm going to leap in here and do some summing up, because when you're doing inquiry, something that needs to be done is a recording of questions. So there's some questions I heard in Mercy's discussion and offering. And Mercy, if you could tell me if these questions are helping you, are helpful, and say what you said. And they might say it in a different way. How might we create ways for community input, and particularly the input of culturally specific organizations and racially and ethnically diverse groups of people? That was one question that I heard. Mercy, is that okay? How do we measure the effectiveness of current programs and practices of community engagement that the police department currently has in place? And in that last piece, I heard this: how might the PD review or have a learning review or debrief to determine the appropriate level of police presence in different situations? Oh, Mercy, you're muted.
I said that's correct.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure we captured those, and I've got them written down too, Paolo. Chief Groshong, one thing, I want to go back a little bit. I kept hearing, we want to be better. And I know that this might be a question that you're going to define as we go through these several meetings. Thinking about right now, how do you define better? What would be better, a better state? And what does it look like in interactions? I think Officer Smith did a lot of this work talking about what a good interaction would look like. And how does it connect to the department's mission?
Okay, so what it means to be better to us is continually evaluating what we do and why we do it, and how we do it, the why.
Okay.
Is the why successful? Is it successful for us? Is it successful for our community? And continually evaluating that and making changes. We make changes to policy. I don't want to say all the time, but continually, when we find something that even Lexipol says, hey, do it one way, and we maybe agree, or and then we find out through a call an officer goes on, or a critical incident, that, whoa, we missed that one. Our policy doesn't address a certain aspect, or our policy isn't adequate. And then we go back and we readdress and maybe make changes to that policy that better fit our community.
So I hear you talking about policy and this idea of being successful. So a successful interaction would end, fill in the blank. A successful interaction would...
With police to community, or?
With police to community, or community to police.
Okay, would be to professionally serve our community members and successfully communicate to our community members, and so that they're satisfied customers. They're our customers. And satisfaction can be in several different forms. and a big part of that is being transparent, legitimacy, explaining why we do what we do. You know, years ago, it was this path of, you know, why, officer, you know, maybe why are you doing this, or why? Well, because I'm the police and you're not, or whatever that might be. That doesn't fly. It hasn't flown with this department in many, many years, but it's about the why. It's explaining why.
Right.
It's trust. It's treating people with respect, which we do. Now, we're not perfect. And we take care of that when we get complaints, investigate them to the fullest. Whether the complaint can be anonymous, we still investigate that. If somebody makes a complaint, we will investigate it because we aren't perfect. And I know it would be easy to say, well, that person just emailed in anonymously or called and left a message anonymously. That doesn't float here. We investigate it and we find out, if we can, who the officer is, and we address it. So it's all about being legitimate. It's communicating and listening, and for the community to know they are being heard.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to interject real quick before we get to Tanya, Kosikan, and Anjabin. In about 12, 13 minutes, we are going to be transitioning to what our next steps are. So just kind of let that also settle in your brain.
Quick little thing in here, Dori, is I'm hearing a piece that we need to address as well, because policy is one thing, but our procedures are another. And we don't necessarily, there's not necessarily a manual that says how many cars are going to go serve a call. It has to do with our experiences. It might be a decision by the supervisor on the street for that particular shift. It might be the officer's comfort level on whether that officer wants to have 1 or 2 cover cars with him or her. So there's more discussions that can be had about our protocols and our procedure and our response to different types of calls, which I think is what I hear Mercy asking is, why do you need to send 8 cars over here? And if we knew more about what the facts were in that particular case, we might have an explanation. I would invite her to reach out to Lieutenant Stellingwerf and maybe give them some more information so that we can explore that, because maybe, Mercy, we could give you a really good answer for why there was 7 or 8 cars there. Because sometimes, yeah, we do send 7 or 8 cars out to a call. It just depends on what information we have. And a lot of times we'll find out the information we had didn't warrant it, but that's what we had at the time. So there's a big piece of this puzzle, and I see it that's in our response protocols, and that's another component we can train to.
If it's all right, I'm going to jump in, moderator hat on. I'm going to cheat a little bit. We have about 10 minutes left in this discussion. And Tanya and Kosikan, I do want to hear from you, but I actually want to have Anjabin jump the line because I like to hear from people who haven't spoken yet. So Anjabin, we're gonna put you on next.
Well, hello, hi. So yeah, I got to do improv. I wasn't ready. So my question was already in the chat box, but I thought of some more along the way. So one thing I'm curious about is, I can't remember who said it, but someone said, we spend a lot of time training. Great. Who's doing the training is what I want to know. And how I would really like to have us and the public, when there's an oversight committee, make recommendations and decisions on who is doing the training, because part of the problem nationally is the people who are doing the training have, especially outside consultants that are brought in, have their own problematic histories. And so we're continuing to perpetuate these systems of oppression. And so one thing that I would like to hear from you all is, are you open to us telling you and giving you feedback on who should be doing the training for your departments and what kinds of training? Because I'm wondering, you know, there was conversation about implicit bias, and now the data on that are starting to be mixed about whether or not it's even useful to do. But the conversation is now becoming, we need to talk about whiteness and how we perceive people that are different than us. And so who can do those trainings for your department? So that's my first question. My other question is like a subset of that is, how much time do you spend on communication and de-escalation training compared to compliance training? which is when we get into the use of force and how to get people to comply. And then I just want to throw this out there for everybody that the statistics are pretty clear. In Washington County at large, the ratio of cops to population is 1 to 1,000. The ratio of mental health professionals to population is 1 to 3,000. That's alarming, right? And so my third question is, how committed are you and your department to shifting and being allies and shifting into community care, which puts at front and center the needs of the community's mental, social, financial, etc.?
Thank you for that. Those are really awesome questions. They're very in-depth questions. So I'll answer a couple, but I would ask for your patience, and if Dori's taking these, or Paolo, that they send them to us, and I can better explain in more in depth, because they are important, and I just don't want to sit here. It's 8, 10 at night and try and answer these to the fullest extent that they deserve. So our training division is made up. We have a lieutenant in our training division, and a sergeant, and 3 training officers. So our training for compliance is done internally. And, there's our times during in-service training, which is mandatory training, that we have brought outside trainers in for stuff like de-escalation and other, other types of training. So I would ask that, and as I spoke to before, community care, as far as people in mental health crisis on that end of it, we're not prepared for that. We send officers to 40-hour classes for critical incident training, trauma-informed care. It's not enough. It's not. We are not mental health or social workers. We do our best with the training that we have. And so I would be more than happy to answer those more in depth, either through email, if somebody wants to email those to me, or they can be part of the discussion in the next 6 months.
I did want to go ahead and amplify too Anjabine's first question about what's your take on public insight and feedback on training?
Well, as I said earlier, we're open to listen and for suggestions. Some of those suggestions might not be practicable. Some of them might. So if you're asking, yes, we are definitely open to suggestions.
Awesome. Anjabine, do you feel like that was enough of an answer for now?
For now, I'd like to go more in depth about this, because I know
cool.
there have been some hiring practices that I've seen in the news that BPD hired. I think it was a former Portland police officer who had shot an unarmed motorist to do some training for them. And things like that are really concerning to me and to the public at large. And so those are conversations that I want to have. And I would like more transparency around the training process, who's doing the training, and us being able to make strong recommendations. But again, I respect that you need to do some more research on that, Chief. And so I look forward to hearing a more robust response, maybe via email if Paolo wants to send you the questions, or at our next meetings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and so I just wrote deep dive on training and circled it a whole bunch. Because I agree with you. I think that is a potential area that we could look at quite a bit. And I'd love to see, like, if other people are like, oh, yes, that, I love the nodding heads thing. Anjabine, are you okay if we kick over to Tanya? Can you sum up your thoughts in 30 seconds?
I can. So there should be more social work support for the officers. It's ridiculous that we think, oh, do DV and then go take care of a drunk driver and go do. I really think we need to get some grants or something to support the officers to not have to do that part of the work, and that we are helping our officers have develop resiliency. There's tons of studies on soldiers and PTSD and resiliency building, and I'd love to see that be a really strong part of what we give our officers, so they're not eating their gun or whatever. That's it. Under 30, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And I liked, for those of you not following the chat, Paolo had a really good point. So we'd love to see those additional questions. So you can send them to Paolo, you can send them to me, you can send them to that equity email address. Yeah, I would really like to hear that because I think that we're running short on time. So let's hear from Kosakan.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Chief Groshong, we understand that you and your colleague, your job, your work is very challenging, and we're asking changes so we can have the best experience with our police department here in Beaverton. But we also care about you. So can you tell us, everything is being thrown at you tonight. So can you tell us how this change can make your work safer and what do you expect from the community?
How what we're doing tonight can make us safer?
Yeah, how all these changes that we're asking, we want the BPD to implement. I mean, in the next sessions, we'll be suggesting things and a recommendation policies. So what do you expect the community from the community, and how these changes can make your job safer?
Well, I'm expecting a different view on things. It's real easy to get tunnel vision, especially if you're doing this job day after day. I'm not saying we do that, but it's a hard job, and it's easy to forget the little things once in a while and not pay attention to the things we should all the time. And I'm relying on you guys to give us more of a perspective on where you're all coming from, as far as how you see law enforcement or you see your police department. And I would ask that we focus on our police department and our community. And I realize this is a nationwide problem. I truly understand that. But my hope is that we focus on what we have here in our community, in our city, and our police department, and what we're doing right and what we can do better, both policy-wise and, as Captain Smith said, procedurally, to make our police department better. And then, did you have a second to that?
Let me see if I'm muted.
So Kosakan, what I was hearing you say, what I was hearing you say,
community-wise, like,
okay, perfect.
How do you expect the community to react, or to the perception of the community from of the police? Do you expect to see any change, and how do you?
Well, I hope
that you want the community start to like perceive out the police department.
Right. I would hope that you know, I think it was Tanya was talking earlier about people are afraid to call the police because they're afraid of retaliation, or that we're going to come, you know, to the location with 5 cars if you're just calling to make a complaint or something like that. And I would hope that we would build upon, I think we do have some community trust, but I think we can build that trust even more to where we don't have people that are afraid to call the police. You know, and like, I'll think of it as an example. Officers went on a domestic violence call, and this woman, I can't remember what country she was from, that escapes me. She was here with her husband, and he beat her severely every day. And finally, somebody called, I'm not sure who. We went and we got her out of that situation. And she had never called 911 because the country she came from, you had to pay the police to come. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, we have somebody in our own community that thinks that they have to call the police, or that they have to pay the police to come and help them. So it's these, I mean, it's kind of an off example, but it's these kind of experiences that we don't even think about. I would never think that there's somebody in our community that's afraid to call the police, or thinks they have to pay for our services. So it's those kind of things that we want to overcome and build trust and educate. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you if you're calling for help. So I hope I answered that.
Yeah.
That's called trauma. Yeah. That's called trauma, cultural trauma. And that's what I see in my neighborhood, because someone with a gun and a black shirt, someone from Mexico or any of the Latinx countries are going to perceive that as, oh shit, you know, and I've talked with people from the DAB community who are commission, and they have told me about how they've heard, you know, folks in the community talk about, well, we're just going to deal with it like we did in El Salvador. Well, that wasn't a good, you know, you take hits out on people. And, you know, it's figuring out how we, this board commission and the churches and the cultural communities and the temples and the mosque, and we can all come together and help with some acculturation issues and sensitivity training or whatever we want to call it for the police, so that we are united and that we are giving people their human rights, but we have to understand their trauma, their history. Sorry, I'm going on, but.
I really, oh, go ahead, Chief Groshong. It seemed like you were about to say something, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just nodding my head.
I wanted to say, this seems like a really nice point. One, time-wise, it's time to move on, but I think that there was a really nice bookend in what you said there, that what you want is for people to not be afraid to call the police. That's a pretty, like, I think that's what we all want, right? And that feels like a really powerful place to just, like, let's pause and set that. I almost want to set that as our intention for these sessions, that we want people to not be afraid to call the police. So our next agenda item is clarifying next steps. Paolo, is that okay if I lean on you for that part?
Yeah, sure. And really what I'm thinking about here is, of course, people chime in, but as maybe we could get into a regular norm of when we come up to these next steps parts of the meeting, as we look at also our next topic. Our next topic is data transparency and communications. And so what do we need to prepare ahead of time? And I think, you know, maybe right now you can't think of all that right now, but it would be really helpful to, okay, well, we could easily keep going in these conversations, right? But like, what do we want to hone in on and have prepared for the next meeting, where the very specific topic is data transparency and communications. This meeting, I think, was, you know, for very natural reasons, kind of all over the place, but that's not a bad thing. As we move forward, we're going to be going more focused. And I see Dori.
Paolo, I just wanted to leap in here for a moment and say, I heard a couple of things that I want to reiterate. One is that as we're curating materials for people to prepare, we have to think about what's the reasonable expectation, because folks have many other things in their lives. So I think there's degrees, right? So perhaps it's the one-pager summary, and then other materials that people can dive into if they find that they have time, without the expectation of necessarily all those materials.
Okay.
So I just want to throw that out there.
That's solid. I
heard one thing there, a one-pager, and are you specifically saying like the one-pager that Councilor Fagin was asking for?
No, I'm just saying whatever our topic. So for example, if data is our next topic,
got it.
A one-pager with a high level of, here are some elements that we might want to look at. So it means perhaps the co-chair spend a little bit more time looking in advance and coming up and creating that one-pager. Because I don't think, you know, Chief Groshong and the police folks actually have time to do that one-page creation because they got other work to do.
Solid. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Spencer, I see your hand, so let's go to Spencer real quickly.
I don't know what data transmission and communication means, or data transparency and communication means.
That's a solid question. So that would be a good thing to prep for their next meeting, is we should probably explain that. So that's, we want to look in our next meeting at, so what Cameron shared tonight is a great example of this. And the data that we were able to look at, that now Chief Groshong, then interim Chief Groshong, presented to us on Beaverton specifically. So we've been able to see information and data about and from the Beaverton Police Department, but we know that not everybody in the community has access to that, or even if it is public record. You know, Cameron mentioned how incredibly lengthy that document is. We don't know how much of the data that's been shared with us is readily available and accessible. So what we want to look at is essentially how to make it so that more people are able to access that information about the Beaverton Police Department. Like what's in place right now in terms of people being able to, just sort of general members of the public being able to know more about the police.
Mm-hmm. And this happened naturally before too. If I recall, I think it was you, Joy, who brought up, I can't find the use of force policy. And when technically it's available, but it's just kind of hard to navigate through the website maybe. And I think what was produced out of that is, I believe y'all actually put it somewhere. I don't know, where it was more ready. Okay, well, Joy has it. So just think about that too. And maybe like, yes, totally. I know, like, I'm not giving y'all homework, but if you wanted to, like, I personally put myself on my, I was just curious. I was like, how easy is it for me to just to pull up BPD budget? And well, it took me a little bit of time, but I think I got it pretty quick because also I was able to ask some staff. But I think those are things also to think about too.
And that actually gives us a really nice action step in terms of readying for the next meeting. One thing that I would throw out to everyone, in addition to if we send you some additional information, just give yourself the task right now. Ask yourself questions about the police and see if you can answer them. Ask people in your life questions about the police to see if they can answer them. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we are all fairly well technologically connected and engaged citizens. So maybe ask people in your life who aren't as engaged the same way that you are, which gives us a nice, and then otherwise in terms of action steps for the next meeting, Paolo and Dori and Joy and I will confer further and send some stuff out. Am I capturing that all right, Paolo?
Yep.
In terms of prep for the next meeting? So if it's okay, I want us to move to our very final agenda item because I'm excited about it. And this came out of some great wisdom from Dori, which is our final agenda item is, this is a very open question and I'd like to hear from everyone. In an ideal world, what does success look like? And that is specific to what we're doing with these inquiry sessions. So ponder. I'm going to do my teacher thing. Let's all take 30 seconds of think time. So in an ideal world, what does success look like? And I want you to share that answer in like a single sentence in 15 seconds or less. So take a minute and just think. And then as folks are ready to start sharing, Paolo, I think what I'd like to have us do, Paolo, let's have you call on people. And you can go, so yeah, you can go on, you can go on the order that it is on your screen. So we'll have Paolo call on folks.
Cool. Joy. You're muted. You're still muted. Okay.
I'm not muted.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
I got you.
Perfect. Success would be that we come together and agree on the recommendations that we take to the city council and they are passed unanimously and the police department adopts them without fuss and we move forward.
Thank you. I'm writing this in the chat, but up next we have Tanya. I think you're muted. Oh wait, did we lose Tanya? Uh-oh. Okay, we lost Tanya. I'll figure out what happened, but right after Tanya, Chief Groshong, Captain Smith, Lieutenant Stellingwerf, if you'd like to share.
I think I could sum it up in one word, is understanding. Actually understanding each other and where we come, in the way we look at things. And yeah.
For me, the word trust comes to mind. I'd like to think that anytime someone drives by, I believe a Beaverton police officer doing their job, that they trust that their job is being done in the best interest of the community.
So along that vein, my word is confidence, that you're confident that we're doing our job appropriately and professionally, and that we also have confidence in our community to help us out to do our job, because none of us can do it by ourselves. We can't do our job without you, and we can't protect the community without your help, or vice versa. I think I screwed that up. But you understand what I mean. In other words, we all need to work together. It's not an easy job, but we need to have confidence in each other's and in our ability and everything we're doing. It's not a perfect world, but we can get there. So that's it.
Councilor Fagin.
Go with, I guess, being better informed. That all of us that are participating in this have, at the end, have a better information and understanding of Beaverton's police policy and procedures, and that the Beaverton Police Department has a better understanding and information about what HRAC thinks is important, and that there's listening done on both sides.
Spencer?
Building a safe, vibrant, healthy, and trusting community.
Thank you. I have Mercy next.
When all talk and talk lead to action and not just talk.
Yeah, thank you. Cameron.
So true success would be actually creating a world where the police aren't necessary. Whereas all the recommendations we can make are great, and I like that so many of our community members have jobs, but true success would be creating situations where the need for the police is obviated.
Thank you. Kosikan? You're muted.
Okay, fine. Can you hear me? Yep. Yeah, for me, two things is to make Beaverton the most welcoming community in Oregon, or Oregon or nationwide, and have BPD as a model police department all over the country that all the other police departments can benefit from.
Thank you. Jared.
Yeah, I said success would be the creation of actionable policy recommendations that are feasible and lead to culture change. And I think that's the big thing, is just a change in culture overall.
Thank you. I'm gonna skip a little bit because Tanya got kicked off, but she sent me hers. Success, wait, am I muted? No, I'm not. Success is all community voices, police voices are heard, and and policies come from the heart and the head. Tag.
Yeah, for me, it's when we stop to hear on the news those horrible stories of people being killed and choked. The last few weeks have been very distressing. I'm sure not to me, but to everybody. And I kept wondering about the Beaverton situation, the Beaverton police, and I thought, I haven't heard anything like that here. And that's why we're having this meeting and discussing this. So I hope we stop hearing those atrocious pieces of news of people being killed in Oregon and all over the US and all over the world. There's no need for this aggression and violence.
Thank you, Tag.
Thank you.
Annala?
Success for me, the best way that I can think of it is that HRAC would be able to create equitable and sustainable recommendations that actually aid long-term change. So it's not just an immediate policy that's made and we feel like we've done something, but hopefully a chain reaction of sorts, and then we can continue our involvement and also reach better understanding with the Beaverton police, bridge other community gaps. Yeah.
Thank you. Laurel?
I have two. Success to me in an ideal world for the work that we are doing here would lead to us creating a citizens oversight board for the police specifically. And then I got too attached to that word ideal. And my ideal outcome of any kind of police reform work is to come up with a 10-year plan for police abolition. And maybe not total abolition, but I'm kind of with Cameron. So I'm really glad Cameron said that, because I was really worried that I was going to look a little bit off sync of everybody.
I have Dori next. Thank you, Laurel.
I have a couple. So my first thought was really more high level, and it doesn't involve stating or naming particular groups. A safe community where people's dignity and humanity is centered. And the second thought is, what does safety look like? And it's a question, right? So, you know, for me, the success would be us asking the question, what does safety look like? And how do we as a community create safe community?
Thank you, Dori. Angeline?
Hey, I get to go last. I never get to go last. So for me, success on a larger global systemic scale is, I'm going to echo what Cameron and Laurel said, where the first call we make is not to cops, it's to community care. And I think, Dori, that's what you were going for, is there's a model of community care where we have citizens and professionals. I'm a mental health professional, Tanya, the licensed clinical social worker, that are trained to take these calls, and they're subverted, and therefore things don't escalate. And so I'm looking forward to a world in which the first call we make is not to 911.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Laurel if you have anything else to share to close us out.
I want to close this out by saying we are in the midst of a pandemic, and our lives are very strange, and everything is pretty grim, and 2020 has been a ride, and it's only July. And I feel more hopeful right now than I think I have in a very long time. And I'm maybe going to cry a little bit because I'm a crier. And I thought maybe being on video would make me cry less, and I think that's not true. But I just wanted to thank everyone so much for doing this work. I feel incredibly inspired, and you are all amazing, amazing human beings, and this is really cool. And I'm really glad we get to do this. And so I want to thank all of the people behind the scenes who made this happen. So thank you. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Let's close our meeting and have a great night, everybody. I believe, Francisca, if you are capable of ending the meeting, we'll call it a night.
Thank you, Francisca. Also, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and good evening.
All right.